We are diving back into the series that we have been in over the last several weeks that we've titled Devoted. And what we're asking the question this year is this: what does it look like to live lives devoted to the Lord? Because if you are a guest here, you just need to understand that we don't show up on Sundays because this is just like our religious ritual and we try and be good Christians or something. No, we actually believe this stuff. We believe that God actually has spoken through his word, that he is inviting us into a whole new way of living. And we get to be a part of his kingdom like right now. And so we want to do this in a real, genuine way. And so we say, God, what does it look like if we're going to be devoted to you? What does that actually look like in our lives? And we're actually in a little mini series here for 3 weeks as we're talking about what does it look like to be devoted in our money. Now, I know some of you are like, oh, great, church talking about money. I get it, but here's the deal. If we're going to be devoted to the Lord, it can't just be in a few areas of our life. It's got to be in every area of our life. And so that's what we're kind of talking about. If you missed last week we talked about the idea of stewardship, right? We're not owners. When we say, Jesus, you're in charge, you're in control, he's the owner. We're now just stewards. We're saying, God, how can we steward what you've given us? I had a number of people last week talk to me about areas where in their life, not even just money related, but some of them with some relation. One guy reached out and said, you know what, you talked about stewarding some relationships, and I know that God's put a few people in my life that I haven't been faithful about stewarding that relationship. And so I had to make some calls this past week and reach out. And there was a few other people that shared very similar things. And so hopefully all of us can gain that mindset that we're stewards. We're not owners, we're stewards of what God's put into our hands. But this morning, I gotta give you a warning. This morning is gonna be a little different, okay? This is less preaching and far more teaching today. Turn to your neighbor and say, we're going to school today, okay? Sorry, we're going to school today, okay? We're gonna be very practical today, okay? Sorry, some of you are like, great, we're in school today, okay? But this is going to be very practical, and that's the reason why hopefully when you walked in the door, you got some notes. Pull out your notes and wave them at me. You got the notes when you walked in this morning, okay? I want you taking notes this morning because I think all of us are going to have something to walk out the door with. If you didn't get a note, just take a note in your phone. You can do that on your own. If you're with us online, just be taking notes where you are at. But today we're going to be looking at financial principles, issues of money, right? And we're going to talk about how these can change your life. Some of you are a little bit older right now. The things we're going to talk about might be able to address some of the challenges that you're facing in your life right now financially. For some of you who are younger, what we're going to talk about, this actually could set you up for success for the rest of your life. And I think it's going to be really helpful for you. So if you've got your Bibles, turn with me to Matthew chapter 6. Matthew chapter 6, beginning in verse number 24, the first gospel of Matthew, all right? And if you would you stand with me across the room as we're going to read our text this morning? We've got one verse that we're going to read together, but it's going to be kind of the grounding for this message. This is Jesus' words. He says this in verse number 24 of chapter 6. Jesus said this: no one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money. Let's pray. Father, I thank you that you do want to speak to us today. God, in the short time that we have, God, I believe that you're going to speak to our hearts. You're going to challenge us. And I also believe that you're going to give us some tools to walk out of this door with. So, God, I pray you'll help us today. Again, we don't want to go through the motions of faith, God. We actually want to follow you because we know your desire for us is life and life abundant. So help us to walk in that today, we pray. In Jesus' name, everybody said, amen. You can be seated. Well, raise your hand if you have ever been stressed about money. Raise your hand, okay? Basically every hand in the room. So just know this. If you ever get stressed, no, you're not alone, okay? Lots of other people deal with the same thing. Now, I want to ask you this. Why do we get stressed or worry about money, okay? Now, some of you are going to say, well, I'm stressed because I don't have enough money, okay? But hear this. There was a study that was done, and they asked people, how much more money do you need for you to feel comfortable? And you know what the average answer was? 20%. 20%. But you want to know what the unique thing and the crazy thing is? That was the average for everyone. It didn't matter if you had a little bit of money or a lot of money. The answer was the same. Everybody thought the solution to their problem was just a little bit more money. Which just goes to show that how much money we have oftentimes isn't the actual issue. See, the reason why we oftentimes feel stressed and worried is ultimately because we feel out of control. We do. You see, most people aren't taught about finances. I'm going to give you 20 seconds. I want you to turn to your neighbor. I want you to tell them, where did you learn the most about finances? Was it from school? Was it your family? Was it some other place? Or did you just kind of have to figure a lot of stuff out on your own? Turn to your neighbor. Where'd you learn most of your financial stuff from? All right. How many of you learned all your financial wisdom from school? Raise your hand nice and high. No, but we had one person in first service. We need to address that, I think, in the school systems. Like, be a kind of a good thing to talk about. But, okay, how many of you, for the most part, you had to learn a lot of stuff on your own? You just kind of figure it out. Okay, that's the vast majority of the people in the room. No matter what, even if you were taught some stuff, most of us end up having to figure out a lot of stuff on our own. And the amazing thing for us is that God actually has wisdom for us. There's practical wisdom in Scripture for us as it pertains to our financial health. And if we'll simply apply it, if we'll listen to it, it actually can help our lives. And so this morning, I want to start with our big so what. We always have a big so what. What's the point of this thing? I always want to have one clear takeaway. And this is the takeaway that I have for all of us this morning. You don't have to worship money for it to control you. You don't have to worship money for it to control you. So, I mean, you read that, you're like, well, I don't want to worship money. I don't think any of us want to worship money. We see people that maybe act that way, like, I don't want that. And I think most of us would consider ourselves followers of Jesus, and we know the gospel that Jesus offers life and he offers salvation when we place our faith in him and when we choose to worship him, when we choose to serve him and to make him the king of our lives. But what did Jesus say here in verse number 24? He says, you cannot serve both God and money. You might think, well, I don't serve money, right? My money serves me. I don't serve money. It's not my God. It's not my idol. But hear this, when our money is out of control, it ends up being our master. Whether we wanted to or not, when our money's out of control, that's the thing in charge. Why? Think about it. Think it in your life. Those moments when your money's been out of control, what happens? It ends up controlling your thoughts. It controls your feelings, it controls your decisions, and ultimately it ends up dictating your joy and your peace for your life. And I think some of you in the room probably right now know exactly what I'm talking about because you're in a season right now where you're just feeling like, man, those money challenges are the thing that's actually dictating my life. And I don't think any of us want to live this way, but so many of us end up falling into this pit. And so today we're going to be looking at four principles of money that are grounded in Scripture. And I want to say, the principles we're going to talk about today, these principles are actually the four fundamentals that we talk about and teach here at ZOE through our financial purpose courses and workshops that we have around here. We've been doing this for several years now. And I think these are really, really important for you, okay? And so I'm going to need some help today. I've got a guy who's going to join me up here. And so would you give it up for my guest this morning, Todd Sipe, as he's going to join me today. You have to give Todd, well, both of us, we have both been sick this past week, so you have to give us a little grace here as we're trying to communicate here today. But Todd,
I have a cough drop and some water this time around.
This is better. First service, we were losing it, so no, that's great. I'm glad. But why don't you let everybody know why are you up on this stage, beside the fact that you're just so debonairly handsome up here, right?
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
So a little of my history and background. So I'm a family guy. I'm married to Barb. She's down here. Barb, wave your hand. I have 4 children, all married, adult age, 4 grandchildren. So I'm really at the core a family guy. We've been attending ZOE for 4 years. Just love it here. This is our home church. We just absolutely have enjoyed our time here. I spent 40 plus years in banking. My last 15, I had the opportunity to work for a banking organization that was owned by Christians. And so the ability to bring your faith life and your work life together just doesn't exist in banking. And I jumped at the chance. And so I had a chance to learn a lot about what the Bible said about money in my job, which was really rare. And then I've been retired almost 5 years. And Barbara and I have set up a nonprofit to bring a different conversation around money, a better conversation, a more biblical conversation of money to churches across the country.
It's awesome. Yeah, and we had the opportunity to meet. I remember it was about 4 years ago we sat down and we were able to have a conversation. I got to hear about some of the things that was going on, and I'm like, man, this is stuff that our church desperately needs, and I think the church at large desperately needs. And so excited to share some of that here with you guys here this morning. I'm going to give you a warning here. These fundamentals, we're going to start here. I'm going to give you 4 fundamentals this morning. That's why I want you to take notes. But I'm going to give you a warning. These 4 fundamentals, some of you are probably going to think, well, duh, Greg, that's obvious. It's going to seem really obvious to you. Here's what I want you to know, that we may know what to do, but oftentimes we don't know how to do what we need to do. And so that's what we hope to fill in the gaps here this morning as we talk about this, all right? And so if you're taking notes, we're going to start with fundamental number 1. It says this: spend less than you make. I know it sounds simple, right? Spend less than you make. Most of you are like, okay, most of us know that we shouldn't spend more money than we have, and yet many of us struggle with this on a regular basis. I'll make up a number. Let's say 90% of your problems would be solved if you could just get this one under control, if all of us could get this one under control, okay? I don't know what the percentage is, but a lot of our problems would get solved with this. Proverbs says this in Proverbs 21:20. It says this. It says, the wise man saves for the future, but the foolish man spends whatever he gets. And I go a step before because we can. Us foolish people, we spend more than we get a lot of times because debt allows us to go spend money that we don't even have, okay? And so the question becomes, how do we address this? As people who know, we might know, yes, I need to spend less than I make, but what does that mean? What does that look like in my life? There's some principles that we've talked about that I think are really helpful.
So one of the principles we teach in this area is something called change your financial equation. And of course, Greg gives me the math question as the banker. So here we go. But I think the best way to describe this equation is probably an observation I have over my 40 plus years in banking. And that's the way people manage their money. For the average household, you have one checking account, right? And money goes in, your paycheck goes in, and you live. You pay your bills, you pay your debts, you buy groceries, gas, and all that kind of stuff. And at the end of the day or end of the month, if there's any money left over, you can save and give that. But for most people, of course, the answer for that is 0. They live paycheck to paycheck. Even if you get extra money, if you get a tax refund or a rebate, that money seems to be gone by the end of the month. And so if you were to put that into an equation, the equation looks like this. Paycheck minus your debt, minus your bills, minus your spending equals whatever you have left over, which is savings and giving, right? Now, as Christians, we want to be good stewards of our money, and we start out with the best of intentions. But one trip to the Target, one trip to Costco, one family night out with a meal, and our intentions often get lost with our everyday spending. But what if we could do a little bit differently, right? What if we could, within our checking account, identify all those things that you really have to pay for, right? The things you have to pay. You know what I'm talking about. Your mortgage has to be paid, your car payment has to be paid, student loans, all of your debt has to be paid, but your bills have to be paid as well, right? Your utilities, your insurances, and even if you sign up for subscriptions, that money's coming out, so you have to take those out. Wouldn't it be nice if we could just set that money aside and then know how much we actually have left to spend, right? And so if you were to change that equation, it would look more like this. Paycheck minus your commitments equals what you have left over and you can spend, right? But here's the key. Your commitments include commitments to God, commitments to yourself through savings, and then commitments to others, right? So we've taken the savings and the giving portion and put it over into this bucket called commitments.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I remember hearing this, and this was really, really helpful for me in my life. I sat down with Todd, and he was starting to explain all this stuff, and then he started drawing up something he called a framework. And I'm like, what in the world is it? And so he started talking, and I went to my whiteboard, and I started drawing on my whiteboard. And in a few minutes, my mind was blown. I'm like, oh, my word, this explains the frustrations and the stresses that we feel in our home. And suddenly I began seeing this could actually alleviate a lot of those pressures in my own life. It was so this morning I joked that I feel a little bit like Hair Club for Men. I'm also a client here this morning because I've been using this stuff for several years now, and it's totally helped Amber and mine. And so what he talks about is like, what if we would think differently rather than having, because I think most of us, for a long time, Amber and I had one checking account, one savings account. There was some other retirement, all that kind of stuff, but that was kind of normal money. I remember a couple years into marriage, I added a second checking account because I was trying to solve some of these problems myself and figure out how can I arrange our money in a better way that we can move in a healthy way. But this model, this framework, suddenly opened my mind to see it in a different way. And so I want to help explain it to you real quick here. I'm going to put something up on the screen here. All right, the process and the framework we're talking about requires 4 accounts. Turn to your neighbor and say, that's a lot of accounts. Okay? I know it feels like a lot of accounts, okay? In fact, I had somebody this morning after first service. I'm going to have him share a story sometime. He's saying, you know what? I did this to my finances. I went through Financial Purpose a couple years ago, and it took a little bit of work to set this up, and it has totally changed our home. And so note, it takes a little bit of work. But this process creates 4 accounts, 3 checking accounts and 1 savings account. 3 checking accounts and 1 savings. Let me explain what it looks like. Checking account number 1, that's your monthly commitments. Money goes into this account, gets placed into this account to deal with all of your monthly commitments. What are your monthly commitments? It's the normal stuff. It's your bills. It's the things that you have to pay every single month. It's your mortgage, all those kind of things. It also might be things such as your giving. You might include that in there because it's something I'm going to do every single month. Whatever you are going to do on a monthly basis, that's the checking account that you're going to pay it out of. Now, how do you figure out what that is? My guess is if you sat down, you could come within a few dollars of how much you need, how much you're going to spend every single month. I know you have some bills that fluctuate a little bit, but you know about how much that gas bill is going to be, about how much that electric bill is going to be, and you can guess that. So if you add that all up for the month, right, and you say, okay, I need to have that much money in this account every month, okay? So then you can go to your account and make sure that you're depositing that much money into that account every single month. It might, if you get paid twice a month, you divide it in 2, put that into the account. Here's the cool part about it. Those are all those bills and all those things you got to pay. If you make sure the money's deposited in there, and then you set up auto pay for every one of those payments, you set it and go. You never have to look at that. You don't have to worry about it. You can, every once in a while, you check in with it just to make sure, hey, is there anything off? But that thing runs itself now, right? Once a year, you can step back and say, is there any assessments that I need to make? But that can run itself, all right? So then we get to our second one. And this is the one that was like mind-blowing for me at the time, because that's our non-monthly commitments. What are non-monthly commitments? Non-monthly commitments are all the things that you know are going to happen. Like you can predict it's going to happen. It just doesn't happen every single month. It might be your garbage bill that happens a lot of times, every quarter or something like that. Might be bills like that. It might be predictable expenses that you know you're going to have. We have a dog that requires haircuts. Guess what? That's a non-monthly expense. I know it's coming. Right? There's other things that happen. How many know you have kids that play sports, and that costs a lot of money, okay? Nauseating amounts of money, all right? I know that the sports are coming, but I wasn't fully preparing for them. And so how many know you have one of those months where it's like, oh man, I gotta buy new tires this month, or I have to pay my registration for my car, or one of those things, it's $300-$400, and it just made the rest of the month feels like tight. You're like, I forgot about that expense. Oh, I gotta deal with that expense. What if you prepared yourself for that? See, what I did when I did this, I took every expense I could possibly imagine. I put Christmas into that bin. I put birthdays into that. I know birthdays are coming. I know I'm going to spend some money on birthdays. Let's start planning. I took that number and added, and it was thousands of dollars. And I'm like, no wonder I'm feeling pressure all the time, because there's all these expenses that I'm not always ready for. And so I take that number, divide it by 12 once a month, or divide it by 24 if you get paid twice a month, and every paycheck, you start putting money into that account. So guess what? When it's time for little Millie to get her dog haircut, well, guess what? I pay it out of that account, and I know the money's there, right? It's time for Christmas. I know the money's there. It's time for a sport. I prepared for that. I'm not, it's a crunch month. No, I'm prepared for that month, okay? All right? And so that's that. And the next account, third one, is our spending account. I'll come back to that one in a moment. Fourth account is a savings account. Now, some of you might say, well, I have more than just a savings account. You're right, but right now we're dealing with a basic savings account. Most of us need to have one of those set up. In that savings account, we're going to talk about that in a moment, the types of things that we should be saving. But that becomes a commitment. At the beginning of the month, you put that money in there. You're allocating money toward your savings account. So if you've taken care of your monthly, you've taken care of your non-monthly, you've taken care of your savings, whatever's left over, the remainder goes into your spending account. And guess what? You can spend that money without having to worry like, oh no, what else do I have to deal with? No, you've already paid for everything else. Everything else has been prepared for. Now you're able to spend without fear, without concern. You know what it is. If there's an adjustment that needs to make, you can make it. But now you have a system that sets you up to deal with all the things in your life, so you don't have to live out of control, and money no longer has to be the thing that's in charge. All right? And so how was that? Was that clear?
What do you think? Has the student become the teacher?
Yeah, whatever. Try not to. We'll see. But I think this is one of the things. Again, I was so funny when that guy, he used a more fun word when he told me that it was a challenge to get set up. But once it was set up, he said, it literally has changed my life. He's like, I'm going to go buy a bunch of these books and I'm going to give them to other people because this has changed our life. And I think that this is something that could change your life if you begin to implement it in your life, all right? All right, we're going to go on to fundamental number 2, okay? Fundamental number 2, save with purpose. Save with purpose. How many of you out there are savers? Raise your hand. Okay, not enough of you. We're fun in this room. We like to spend money in this room, don't we? Okay, no, it's fine. Save with purpose. The verse that we just read, it said, the wise person saves money, right? They're prepared. But whether it's saving for potential emergencies, because we all know they're going to come, or whether it's saving for short-term goals, or it's saving for long-term or investing for long-term health, building a habit of saving is necessary. But I'll say this, it's more than just tossing a little bit of money into an account. The key word here is save with purpose. There's purpose. And so how do we go about doing that?
Yeah, there's a problem in having money in savings, to be honest. It's called the marginal propensity to spend. The more money we have in savings, the more our wants become needs, right? I used to want a new iPhone, and with money in savings, I now need a new iPhone. And the truth is, when you get money in savings, spontaneous spending does go up. And so in order to prevent that, one of the principles we teach is to assign a purpose for every dollar in savings. And so you'll set up your savings goals, whatever they are. You've talked some that could be savings. You put them in your second checking account, but maybe you're saving for your kids' college. Maybe you're saving for down payment on the house. Maybe you have emergency savings. Maybe you're saving for vacation. I mean, you get to figure out what are the goals. Here's the key. Take your savings balance and assign all of that to one of the goals. It will change your approach to savings. It will now be fun to save. Most people don't think savings is fun. They want to spend. They don't want to save. But if you save with purpose, all of a sudden you're saving for vacation. And when you go on vacation, you now have the money set aside, and it feels good to go on vacation. So that's something that we focus on.
Yeah, and what I love about that is that now you have a decision to make. If you want a new TV, I remember you saying this. If you want the new TV, you can buy the TV. You just have to decide, what are you giving up to buy that TV? Because you've saved the money. If you've assigned a purpose, if it's just $5,000 sitting in a bank account, sure, I can spend the money, but what if that $5,000 represents 3 or 4 things that you're working toward? Now you have a decision to make. It's still your money. You get to decide what you want to do, but you're going to make an intentional decision rather than just saying, I'm just going to spend the money. No, instead of doing this, I'm going to buy this TV now. It's an intentional decision.
Yep, perfect,
Yep. All right, so that's number 2, save with purpose. Okay, we're going to jump on to number 3. Beware of debt. Beware of debt. How many of you have large amounts of credit card debt? I'm just joking. I'm not going to make you raise your hands. Okay, I'm not going to do that. I'm not as dumb as I look. Okay, one of the biggest issues in our society is consumer debt. We all get that, okay? And you can use debt or credit to buy just about anything. I saw stuff now. You can buy shoes. You can buy shirts. You can buy clothing items on 4 payments now. You don't even buy the shirt. You got to make payments for it. Like, there's ways to get into debt. And I think we all know how suffocating debt like that can be. Like, we get that, okay? And so this is why we say beware. Now, I will say, are there ways to leverage debt for good things? Yes, you can leverage debt to purchase a home. You can leverage debt to grow a business in some way. There are things you can do like that. But the important word is beware. Beware of it. And so what's one of the things that we need to think about?
So one of the principles we teach is manage your debt-to-income ratio. Show of hands. How many people know what a debt-to-income ratio is? Yeah, a few people. How many know what your debt-to-income ratio is today? 1, 2. Fewer hands, 3, 4.
I see the financial people with their hands in the air right now.
Yeah, not surprising. Most people don't know what their debt ratio is. Yet it's one of the most important numbers you can look at in your finances. Well, let's start with the definition of what the debt-to-income ratio is. So if you would bring it, oh, there it is. So if you take a look at what it is, it's trying to measure how much of your income goes toward debt payments, right? And the definition is total monthly loan payments divided by your gross monthly income. And so that's how you do the calculation. But why is this ratio so important? Well, in a culture, in a world that expects us to buy the biggest and best things, the banking industry actually uses this ratio to determine how much money they'll lend you, right? And our culture wants us to borrow as much as we can, right? And so the banking industry uses this. What's an example of how this shows up, how easily we can slip into this? Think about a home buying process. I'm sure many of you have gone through the journey of home buying. One of the people you meet with early on in that process is your mortgage loan officer. And you set up an appointment and you are looking to get pre-approved for a loan. And you walk in and you ask the question, how much money can I borrow? Right? Wrong question, but you ask that question. And they gather some information around your income and expenses and the likes, and then they give you a letter that says you can afford a $500,000 home. And you wonder, how can I do that? But they say you can do it, so you go buy a $500,000 house. What you don't realize is that the banking industry uses your debt-to-income ratio to qualify you for that $500,000. And the industry today, well, you can borrow up to about 43% of your gross income for debt-related payments. So almost half of your income can go toward debt. And this, by the way, this is gross. This is before all that stuff's taken out. It's not your net income. But if you do the math on this, it's kind of crazy, to be honest with you. If you take the payments of 43%, and we all have to pay taxes, right? So I'm going to throw 27% on our taxes for state, federal, FICA, Medicare, sales tax. It's more than that, but I'm going to round it to 27. So 70% of your income is gone before you can live. And in this country, we spend about a third of our income on food, gas, clothing, those kind of things. And so if you add up the math, I think it's 103%. It's 103%. Well, and it begs the question, how much money is there to save and give? And in this country, it's a problem. This isn't a math problem. This is a real life problem. Yeah. Because 3 out of 4 Americans in this country live paycheck to paycheck, have little to no savings, are burdened with debt. So this is what we're living out every day.
Yeah. And I think what's great, this is a practical thing that you could take. I mean, I would guess most of the people in the room have no idea what that ratio is. It might be, you might not like the answer, but take some time today and figure out what that is. Not just your mortgage payment, but all debt payments, take all that, divide it by your gross income, and find out what percentage are you at. And it might reveal to you why you're feeling the pressure that you're feeling, because it's possible you're going to realize that percentage is significantly higher than what it should be. What would you say should be a threshold that you shouldn't even think of going over?
Yeah. So let me get there, just take a turn to get there. So if the wrong question is, how much can I borrow? What's the right question, right? And the right question is, how much should I borrow, right? And we teach this framework. Greg just went through the framework. We teach this framework. And the answer is, you should have a feel for how much of a payment you want, right? And the framework helps you walk through that. You know what your commitments are to God, to yourself, to others. You know what your spending habits are. You know what your income is. You should have a pretty good idea of what you think you can afford, given the framework, and bringing balance to that framework. And so, first of all, I suggest that you go to your framework to figure it out, and you walk into the loan officer and says, hey, I need my payment to be this. How much house can I afford with this kind of a payment? So it's a different approach. Now, a lot of people always ask me, so Todd, what's the number? Is there a maximum amount of debt to income that I should do?
Smallest number possible, that's right.
And I'm a math guy, so if you do the math, it's pretty clear. I mean, it's simple math. If you have more than a 30% debt ratio, the ability to save or give is pretty limited. Yeah. And there's actually study after study that's been done around this number, and the ability to accumulate any kind of wealth or experience generosity, it's tied to this debt-to-income ratio, and 30% tends to be the number. By the way, lower than 30 is better, and 0 is the best.
The goal isn't to be 30 perfectly, right?
Yeah, 30 is tight. Anything less than that gets better and better.
Yeah. Awesome. Sweet. All right, we're going to go on to fundamental number 4 here, okay? Which is this. Above all, give cheerfully. Above all, give cheerfully, which some of you that feels like a weird fundamental to produce financial health, but it's true, because hear this. If we do everything else that we just talked about, right? You're not spending too much money, you're saving money, you're not getting into debt, all that kind of stuff, but we don't grow a heart of giving and generosity, it might keep our bank account full, but our heart will still be in danger, okay? And we go, what did Jesus say? Just before the verse that we read earlier today, in Matthew chapter 6, verse 21, Jesus says this. He says, "For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." So the principle is your heart is magnetized to what has your money. And so if all you're doing is using your money for you, it makes your heart very toxic because your heart now is very self-centered and only focused on yourself. And so what God's desire, the reason he talks about being generous isn't just because God needs your money. Guess what? God doesn't need your money. He wants you free. That's what he wants. He doesn't want you bound by the things that are actually sucking the life out of you. He wants you to experience life and life abundant, all right? And so when we choose to invest in others, when we do that, it actually brings freedom to our lives. And so there's a really simple step that we can take when it comes to this idea.
Yeah, our teaching and framework really wants to honor giving of our first fruit, right?
Yeah.
So we talk about, the principle we talk about is make giving your first commitment. And how we've set up the framework, go back to Greg's illustration, the first thing you fund out of your payroll is your monthly commitments. And we have built the framework, the very first commitment at the top of the list is giving. And so the money is there ready for you to give. And at ZOE, we say there's 3 ways to give, right?
Oh, gosh.
So,
he's doing commercials here, geez. Okay, no, but that's great. And so I'm going to talk a little bit more about some of those tools that are available in a moment for us. But we've kind of gone through some of those practices. But what I want to do is I want to kind of come to a close here. And I want to come back to our big so what that we asked earlier. And the big so what was this. You don't have to worship money for it to control you. You don't have to worship money for it to control you. And so as we've been talking here this morning, it's possible that some of you are starting to recognize, you know what? Money is in control. And it's because I don't have a handle on my money at all. I'm not stewarding it well. My spending's out of control. Debt's out of control. Whatever that is. If that's where you're at, just know you're not alone. And today could be the beginning of a new journey for you. And I know that God wants something better and healthier for you and for your home, for your family, for your future. And so what would it look like for us to take a step that way? I know in my years in pastoring, I've had people with large amounts of money still walk in with significant money problems. And I've walked in with people who have no money, who walk in with money problems. We all can struggle with this. How can we lean in a healthier way, all right? And so I want to ask a question for you, and I want you to pull those notes out that you were taking already. I want you to pull those out. And I want to ask this question. Which fundamental needs the most attention in your life right now? Of those 4. Which one? Is it, the spend less than you make? Are you in a place where you're like, man, I'm spending more than I should regularly? I don't have a means. I don't have a system right now. I don't have a framework. I don't have any framework. I'm just like hoping. And I love saying hope's not a plan. So if that's your plan, good luck, okay? Like maybe that's what it is. Maybe for you, you would say you need to save with purpose. You're saving money, but there's no purpose. So you end up spending it on things you don't want to spend it on. Maybe it's beware of debt. You're going to look and realize, man, I got too much debt. Maybe I need to sell something. I need to get out. I need to make a change with the debt that I have right now. I need to do some work there. Or maybe it is giving. You recognize, you know what? Giving is not. It's just I'm giving leftovers. That's all I give. There's no heart of desiring to give intentionally and purposefully in my life. What I'm going to give you 20 seconds, and I want you to circle which one of those 4 is most important. Now, some of you are like, I'm healthy in all those. Great. Well, which one do you still think God could grow you the most? Maybe you're like, I'm horrible in all those. Great. Which one's are you going to start? Which is the one that's most important right now? I'm going to give you 20 seconds. If you're by your spouse, might be a chance for you to turn to your spouse and talk to them for a second. Say, which one do you think is our biggest need right now? In a moment, I'm going to have us pray over those things. As we say all the time, if we don't take a step in that way, nothing's going to change. So God, would you give us some wisdom in that? But I want to give us some tools before we walk out the door this morning, okay? There's 2 tools I want to talk about. The first one I'm very excited about, and that's this book. Todd and I have been taking the principles. We've been teaching this financial purpose stuff with our congregation over the last 2 or 3 years. We've seen great impact in people in our church, but we've been in the process of trying to get this written down so that it could help more people. And today we are officially launching this book and making it available first to our congregation. For those that are with us online, you can actually find this on Amazon now if you want to be able to purchase that. But I want to let you know about this resource. Okay, what's in this book? Everything that we just talked about, but a lot more is in this, but this is actually a workbook. So what you'll notice is you can go through this book. Every chapter helps you walk through the process of what does this look like? How can you answer these challenges? But at the very beginning of this, there's a QR code. If you scan it, it takes you to the website where you get access. Once you own the book, you get access to a bunch of resources on the website. One of those things is you can set your own framework right there. It's a custom thing that we have built on the website. You can put your stuff right in there, and it's your account, so you can update it as time goes on, as your life changes. You can use that to keep track of your system and say, how can we continue to be better and healthier in this way in our lives, all right? This is a tool for you. In addition to that, the second half of this book is something that I think is really, really helpful, particularly for those who might be a little bit younger. It talks about 5 of the most pivotal financial moments in your life, whether it's marriage, it's first job, it's buying a home, whatever those are, and it gives basic principles and wisdom around those areas to help you. And so I would say this book, I helped write this book, and I wish I had this book 25 years ago. My life would have been easier had I had this book, because there was a lot of things that I've had to learn the hard way, and I think this is going to be a blessing. And so I'm going to make my kids read this, partially because I wrote it, but also because I know it's going to make their life easier. It just will. And so this book is available today. We're making it available to the church here in person, as well as you can grab it online. So I'd encourage you to grab one of these on the way out the door. But alongside this now is going to be the basis of our curriculum when we teach this. And so coming up at the end of April into May, we're launching a financial purpose course right here. We've done this several times in the past. It's 4 weeks long, beginning on April 28th, I believe it is, on Monday nights. It's just for about an hour and a half. You can get together and with a group, facilitated group that walks through this curriculum. And by the end of that 4-week course, you will have built out your own framework and have a new vision for moving forward in your finances. And so this is something that I think is really helpful. Anybody who's done this, specifically walk through the course, has seen a huge benefit, because not only are you walking through it fully, but you also have other people walking with you on the journey, and it's really helpful. And so if you would like to get registered for that, you can go to our events page on our app or to our website and get yourself registered for that. You can register as a single, you can register as a couple. We just say it's good at couples. If you're married or engaged, that would be a good place for you to do that. And when you register for the course, you do get a book is included with it. And if you register today, you can go actually pick your book up if you'd like to, so that you can start looking at it ahead of time. Otherwise, you'll get those books later on in time. But I want you to be aware of that. We'll talk about that more in the future, but just wanted you to know that was coming up for anybody who wants to dig into this in a deeper way. But at the end of the day, our hope for every single person here today is that we would take another step toward health in our finances. Because that's spiritual. You know, a lot of times in life, we think, oh, that's my spiritual part, and then this is my normal life. I think we do that with church. Like, I go to church to do the spiritual things, and then I have my normal life. The same thing happens in everyday life. Oh, I read my Bible, that's spiritual, but how I treat my wife, guess what? That's spiritual too. How I read my Bible, that's spiritual, but guess what? How I lead my children, that's spiritual as well. And how we interact with our finances, that's spiritual. And so we say, God, how can we be faithful in this area of our lives?